Bulldog broadcast on the Field of 68 Media Network. I'm your host, Dan Dickow, former Gonzaga Bulldog, where we share conversations and insight to the life of many Zags. Today's guest, someone who I'm excited to hear a little bit about their background, some of their stories, the impact that Gonzaga had on him, but also the impact that he had on Gonzaga. One of the most energetic and the most positive Zags I've ever been around. Unfortunately, didn't get a chance to be around him too many times, but looking forward to hearing more of his story. Andrew Sorenson. Andrew, thanks for joining. I appreciate the time this morning.
Absolutely, man. Happy to be here.
So we were talking a little bit off camera before we began to record in regards to some of the times and the experiences that you had at Gonzaga, just to fill in the times and the details. So I was unaware of this, but you started at Gonzaga simply as a student. You were sitting in the stands at the McCarthy Athletic Center in the first year it was opened, wanting to be a part of Gonzaga's basketball program. Tell us a little bit about the thoughts that were running through your head that year, and then how you came to be at tryouts and then be a part of the team.
Yeah, well, first year that McCarthy opened, I think any of us who were there when McCarthy opened, I was like, man, I wish we could always have like one game in the old kennel, because that place was rocking. I remember going to all the team camps and just being like, man, how cool would it be to play here? But senior year came and went, and we were out, and you're kind of sitting in the locker room of high school thinking, man, my career's over, what's next? And I just remember getting the big envelope from GU. And I was like, the big envelope from GU is the acceptance letter. It's not the, hey, we regret to inform you didn't make it or you've been waitlisted. And I was super jacked, because I was like, look, heck of a school education wise. And I always thought, education is really important. That's something that no one can take away from you. Let's go do it. But at the same time, I was like, man, I'm going to a basketball school. Why not try out? Like, what's the worst they're going to say is no. And then I'm just going to go hang out at the field house, probably more than my parents wanted me to, and just play. And so first year, getting there and going to school, and was like, all right, got to figure out when tryouts are, because how cool would it be to play for the team? And I remember going into tryouts, and there were like 6 of us, and Tommy Lloyd was the coach, and he was just having us run different drills. And I just remember there was this one drill that was like, we stand in like the half court corner, and he's like, all right, you got 2 dribbles to get to the hoop. I'm like, you're what? 2 dribbles to get to the hoop? It's going to take me like at least 4 or 5. Like, I don't have that athleticism. But it was just such a visual into like, wow, what's really required. And went through tryouts and all that. And at the end of the day, Tommy's like, man, you clearly understand the game, but you're not a Division I athlete. And I'm like, no kidding, Sherlock. Like, yeah, I get it. I'm 6 foot, 165 pounds wet, like whatever. Okay. He's like, but you clearly understand the game. We'd love to have you, come to practice and see if you want to help out. So I remember going to practice, and I had jeans, and I think I had some nice shoes on, because I was like, I want to look good. I want to look like I actually care to be here. And I just remember, that was Roney's last year, B Mike's last year, and just the atmosphere, how cool it was and how close the team was. And just being around that was like just energizing. I mean, I got goosebumps right now talking about it, right? Like just that feeling of being part of something that's bigger than oneself. And I just remember going through, and at the end of practice, I was like, you know what, coach, thank you from the bottom of my heart for this opportunity. But man, I want to play. I want to play. I don't want to just rebound. I don't want to just get the water right. I want to play. And so I thought to myself, I'll see you next year. And of course, Tommy's like, yeah, sure. Okay, whatever. Right. But to me, it was like, how do I invest in myself? How do I would get up in the morning at 6, and I go to the gym and work out, and I would go to the field house, like I said, probably a lot longer than my parents wanted me to. My dad always jokes like, you would tell me about all these games you'd play, and I was really worried about your grades, but clearly it all worked out, and I think something that really helped me at GU was because I was playing at the field house, because I was just a student first, absolutely a student first. I wasn't from day one on campus seen as, ooh, you're a basketball player. It's like, you're a student. And I think that for me made a really big difference for, as a sophomore when I tried to walk on and then made it. People are like, oh my gosh, it's just Andrew. It wasn't that I was the basketball player that was really nice and personable like so many of our guys are. Like, I think that's just something cool about the team, is that we're just students. Like, we're part of it. We're in DeSmet. You're in the dorms with all the other guys. It's not, here's the athlete dorm necessarily. And so I think for me, that experience of being a student first, making the team, it felt like I was kind of playing for everyone else, almost as if they were kind of living vicariously through me, of like, just, I will not, and I'm not going to blow this shot. I'm going to give it everything I got every single day. And it just, man, it better ride than even the wildest dreams could have imagined,
That is awesome. I had no idea that that's how kind of your GU basketball career came about.
Yeah.
You and I had kind of crossed paths every time that I would come back to Spokane, whether to work out in the summers or for a regular season game. And one of the things that I always found refreshing and awesome about you was your excitement to be a part of it.
Yeah.
And that can get lost, I think, a lot in the everyday grind of being on a team.
Yeah.
But the fact that you kind of saw it from a student perspective, sitting in the kennel, to then being on the team and going through the practice, going through the travel, is awesome to hear that backstory of how it came to be.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit now about when you're a part of the team, and you were a part of some really good teams.
Yeah.
Just how unique it is in how the guys come together and accept people on that team from all different backgrounds. Because I can look at my playing career. We had walk-ons such as yourself that earned scholarships. We had guys like Ronny Turiaf from Martinique who came through Paris, France. We had guys from all parts of the country. Anthony Reason in Florida, Alex Hernandez in Las Vegas. But everybody comes together for the same goal. And I know it's a long question, but tell us about your experience and just how special the uniqueness of Gonzaga to bring people from different backgrounds and fit so well together.
Yeah. Both my parents were pastors forever, so growing up, there was always this kind of idea of like, there's something bigger, it's not necessarily about me. Although if you take, any of those coaching lessons or take wooden, right? There's 5 phalanxes of a hand, but it takes 5 phalanxes to make a fist, right? And so that concept of like being part of something and being better together, it's like, well, you go from high school and you're kind of you're surrounded by guys that are just the neighborhood guys. But when you jump into college and, at GU, it's like, it's not just like it's another university. It's not just another basketball team. It's like, you're a top 25 perennial program now because of the legacy that the guys before us had built. And so you're joining something where you're like, man, I got to bring it every day, and I always remember people thinking, oh, well, you're just a walk-on. You're just sitting on the bench. I go, you know what? I had to be the absolute best that I possibly could, because I needed to know which guy was doing what, because who knows which guy's going to get subbed in and be like, Andrew, I don't want to ask the coach, but what's this guy do again? Is he a shooter or is he a driver? So I was so engaged in the game that at the same time, I was like, man, if my number's called, I gotta be ready, And so I think I just approached everything with like, I don't ever want to live with a regret, and understanding how each person kind of fit into the team, right? What were the different skill sets? I can always remember coach saying, KYP, KYP. And when I first heard it, I was like, what in the who's KYP? We don't have a KYP,
Yes.
But then you realize, know your personnel. And that concept, I think, has stuck with me even through professional world of understanding who does what and how do you leverage the best skill sets of each other, because, going 1-on-5 ain't going to get it, And so I think to me, it was not only the opportunity to go to a university that got me outside of my high school bubble, but then just by the fact of where all of our guys came from, that in and of itself gave me such a perspective that maybe in the moment, you don't necessarily understand. But when these people come from different backgrounds and different places, again, we're not just recruiting guys that are in Oregon or California. It's like you're grabbing guys like Abdoulaye Kuso. That dude, like, no way in the world would I have ever expected to cross his paths. But like, I could call that guy up today because I think he's back in Spokane. He legit called me like a month ago. I was like, how are you doing? I'm like, and it feels like no time has passed. And I think, again, just that being part of something and like accepting that everyone comes from a different background and they all have different perspectives to provide. It's just such an incredible opportunity to learn. And I think that's where I look then back at the university and I go, that decision to go to the university for education because I knew what it would provide. Again, even what I expected, it was better than that because it gave me even more than that. And I think this is where, to me, what makes it so special is really that culture. It's the people, it's the relationships. You know, I always joke with people, it's like you come in and I was like, I didn't really know anybody and you're nervous, you know, and you don't want to be the one that trips on the chair at the cog and spills your plate because everyone's going to look at you, right? But then you leave and you're high-fiving, fist bumping, chest bumping the lunch ladies and the janitors, and you're thanking everybody for what they do to keep GU what it is, you know. And you kind of you figure out that you're just a piece, but you want to be the best piece that you can be because you want to make that place so special. And I think by everyone kind of, you know, leaning into that, you know, you look at the teams of guys now and who we're recruiting, and how do you get guys that are that talented and that highly ranked and yet they're buying in from day one? Like, there's something special about that. And so I think that's where, to me, it's like, you know, how do you explain it to someone that's never been there or never experienced that? But like, man, the understanding where all these guys come from and just the opportunity to learn and listen. And sure, there were tough days, but when you can say, all right, that's just a moment, like bigger picture, there's something bigger at play here, like that I'm trying to be a part of. And I think that education and student athlete concept just fit so perfectly for me. It was, man, a blessing for sure.
Yeah, that's awesome. You mentioned Kuso. Yes, he's back in Spokane. He's doing some stuff with Rob Sacre
There
with
you go.
Rob's new company. So it's so funny how guys, you know, are so
Yeah.
intertwined and they stay in touch. Before we move on to the next topic, let me tell you guys a little bit about our partners over at BetRivers Sportsbook. If you haven't signed up with BetRivers yet, now's the time because they are offering a $250 match bonus for your first deposit. But what sets them apart is that they require just one playthrough to turn your bonus into cash money. With their new Rush Pay instant approval, withdrawing your winnings is safer, more secure, and more reliable. With basketball season tipping off, get in on the action by going to betrivers.com today or by downloading the BetRivers iOS app. Must be 21 years or older. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. But I want to ask you now about Coach Few because you mentioned the KYP, know your personnel, know your personnel. You know, there's a couple comments that Coach Few it always is ingrained in my head. Keep sawing wood and then stick-to-itiveness. Those are
Yes.
two.
Yes.
Is there any Coach Few stories, you know, in regards to, you know, anything that stick out to you as like mind-boggling to the outsider, but anybody who's connected to the program knows classic Coach Few?
Yeah. Well, I certainly remember, you know, lunch pail, bring your lunch pail, right? But I also, it's so funny because you even see, you know, again, we were just joking about like, man, it's been a lot longer since I graduated than, even I sometimes want to admit, you know. And it's just so funny to see, it's so cool to see the progression of not just the players in the program, but just coach himself, you know, and going from the assistant early to now, you know, the stories of him sleeping on couches, you know, making it by. And again, I think that's kind of how the program's been built, is like, get it done, you know, lean in and, you know, take care of your family, you know. And so I think a couple of them that stand out are the ones where it's like, let's just say we didn't have a good game. And it's like, all right, your jerseys, all of them go in the middle of the locker room. You're not wearing your jerseys. You know, everyone's wearing a white t-shirt and you're flipping your shorts inside out. So it's white shorts. And you're like, what's going on here? And we played 3-on-0 fast break for like, I swear it felt like 4 hours, dude. Like all we were doing was running up and down. I'm like, dude, like, are we going to do anything else? But it was just it was his, saw and wood, hammering home the basics. Like, we got to get better at this. And it was less about any technical thing, but it was the mental stamina and fortitude to get through something that was tough, or get through a mental block in a game where we weren't accomplishing or running the game plan like we needed to do. And he'd keep hammering it home and we just wouldn't get it. And so there's other ways that he would put in a drill. Again, I'm speaking from perspective and post situation right now. In the moment, you're like, what the, this isn't what I want to be doing, right? So there was that. And then there was another moment. Well, I'll say this, for first couple of years, I swear no one knew my actual name. Like, it was all nickname. Like, I could have sworn forever.
That is a beautiful thing. Everybody at the Gonzaga program gets a nickname, whether you like it or not. You kind of just have to kind of abide by listening to that name being your true name.
Forever I was like, I just hear a name and I'm like, was that me? Like, did I do it? Like, did I turn the ball over? Am I the reason we're on the line? It's so I never really knew if they knew my names, but I remember I want to say it was like my junior or senior year or something. And practice was not going the way coach wanted it to go. And guys were just, it probably was like coming up on finals, or whatever it was. And I think there were some plays that were tough. And, again, my game days, the way I approached everything was my game days were practice, because it was my job and I took it solely on myself. My job was to play Pargo or play Dimitri Goodson or Bolden or Gray or whoever it was that I was guarding at practice. I had to give them literally my best shot every second of every practice, because if I didn't, I wasn't doing my part in preparing those guys for the game. And so there were moments where I felt like my energy was probably above where some of those guys were. And I vividly remember one practice where I was diving for some loose balls and doing some things. And after I dove for a ball, coach goes, everyone on the line. And I'm just sitting here and oh crap. I put us on the line. Oh no. And I remember coach saying, you guys aren't working hard enough and blah, 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 blah. I might as well just start the walk on. And I was like, oh, thanks, coach. Now everyone on this line knows exactly why we're here. But again, it was, every coach has their different way of motivating, and, I can take that as like a great example of where, like, man, maybe I did something right and it was being used as an example, or I remember Bill Greer watching film session, and I had gotten in for 30 seconds at the end of the game, and I was playing help side D, and Greer throws up the clip and he's like, Andrew, I'm being positive here, but I just want to let you know I'm going to give you a critique. And he's like, if this guy, this white slow guy, can't get over, if he can get over there in time to stop the ball, then all of you guys should be able to do it. And I'm like, again, thanks, I think, but just little things like that just, I'll never forget those, in the sense of like, it was delivering a thank you for doing that, because I was able to use you as an example, even though in the moment you're like, you hate it. Or I do remember then the last one on my senior year where it's like, that when the coach goes, what are you thinking? What are you thinking? Don't respond. Do not respond, because it's not going to go how you think it's going to go. And so, I've done this is my last year. I'm like, I've done this for however many years, and I know guys are not supposed to respond. And I had thrown a ball up that was like, hey, literally like some guy just jump and dunk it. It was a perfect lob. But one of our big guys just didn't even see it coming. He was more focused on like the back screen on the lob. And I was like, oh, crud. And here comes coach, and he's right. He's like, what were you bloody thinking? What were you thinking? And I'm like, don't respond, don't respond, don't respond. Well, coach, I was like, oh, you idiot. And he's like, I didn't ask you to tell me what you were thinking. That, and so it's funny now to look back. And I think coach was, he always tried to build guys up, and he had his way of doing it. And sometimes it was more breaking guys down, because he's like, look, if you run the X's and O's out of this huddle, it's a bucket. The only time we didn't score on an out of bounds play was when we didn't run it right, and I think that's something that Fuey has always been known for. So those X's and O's and the offensive schemes and how we set that up. I mean, just look at the offensive ratings of the program since literally he took over, right? But I think what you've also seen him progress on is just how to be less just a coach, but like there's a lot more that goes into it, right? And how he relates to the players and how he not necessarily criticize, but how he coaches, how he builds those guys up. And it's been really fun to see him progress. And then at the same time, see all the other assistants progress, right? Like Leon at Boise State and Tommy at Arizona, like how amazing. Like all these guys are getting their opportunities, and so it's just been super fun to be around it. But obviously just, coach consistency, right? Think of how many other programs have a coach that jumps, goes somewhere else, but that consistency is, I think, a reason we continue to do what we're doing.
Yeah, consistency here in Gonzaga is amazing. But the consistency of the support from Nike has been off the charts. I remember when I was a player, graduated in 02, we were at the infancy stages of a great partnership with Nike. They helped a couple of us out with some extra shoes here and there when needed. Thank you very much, Eric Lautenbach.
Right. Yeah,
but now Nike is one of, Gonzaga is one of the true Nike elite programs. You've worked for Nike now for a number of years. You don't necessarily work in college basketball, but you probably with Nike cross over with a lot of conversations. What is the feeling at Nike towards Gonzaga, and how has working for Nike been for you?
Yeah, it's been a really cool, again, Nike, they're such a strong culture, and I think, again, there's a mission and a purpose at Nike that, companies have mission and purposes, but like when you can find that mission and purpose in a company that is also like maybe what's important to you, that's a pretty unique, special opportunity. And so I think that's one of the big reasons Nike has just stuck out to me, is the fact that mission and purpose of like, hey, if you have a body, you're an athlete, and we're trying to make better athletes and serve athletes. Well, Gonzaga is known for servant leadership. And so there's this element of like serving consumer, serving others, like that concept is really connected to me. And just seeing how the program has kind of built it up from, ground zero. Nike's the same kind of a story, built it up from ground zero. And if you've ever read the book Shoe Dog, which was the book Phil Knight wrote, essentially it's an entrepreneurial book, but it's also like an autobiography. It's a super unique, cool twist. And it literally, to me, it talks so much more about the early days, and it talks about all the times Nike should have failed, yet they didn't. And to me, that's, GU in the 90s had its big moment of like, how are we going to do this? How are we going to keep succeeding? And I think the program was a big part of that, back in the Fitz days and the run from 99 going forward, like that had a big deal on impact of keeping the school around. And so I think to me, that connection of just, you faced hardships, but you're also still have a major goal that you're striving towards. Seeing the program, even when I was there, it was like, okay, we got team shoes now, or we got an extra pair of sweats that maybe the guys before only got one pair of sweats, a few years ago was the 2017, we were playing North Carolina, and Big E's walking in there with like all the Kobe special elites. I'm like, wait a second, where was that for us?
Yeah.
Right. But it's so funny that every generation of Zags, all of us players, we all have that moment to look back on and say, why didn't I get that? But the guys now wouldn't have that unless those building blocks were built first. And I think there's something so cool about GU and each of the guys that play. They truly understand the building blocks that went in before that. Like that moment when we got to go to the 2017 Final Four and we showed up the night before, like I got that picture in my office. That's still one of the absolute coolest memories of my life, because that was just saying, we're in this together, right? That is very much what, again, it feels like at Nike is you got these teams of people that are like, we're in this together. How do we, again, utilize our strengths to achieve whatever business goal or solve whatever problem is in front of us, and being able to see Gonzaga grow as Nike continues to grow, and we're hitting some pretty unbelievable, financial business metrics and achieving some pretty awesome brand recognition. It's like we're kind of in these parallels of like succeeding, but you never want to forget kind of where you came from. And so I think to me, that's one of the things that's super, super cool is, obviously being here in, Beaverton is headquarters, even though everyone calls it Portland. It's a huge Oregon Duck fan base, like it crazy, but there's a mighty crew of Zags here as well. And so it's really fun to not feel like you're just completely like the only Zag around. Like there's a number of us, and that just being a Zag, it's the connection. I always make the joke of people like you go to Gonzaga, a Bulldog, and you leave a Zag, because there's something that transitions in there and how you think, how you're going to make an impact to the world. And I think that comparison again to servant athletes and creating servant leaders, like that is just it goes hand in hand. And so to me, I feel really, really fortunate where I've landed. Obviously in my world of kind of manufacturing and operations and supply chain, the last couple of years has been wild, but I also think that Gonzaga prepared me in the sense that, you take all these other classes that maybe you aren't necessarily about your major, so if you wanted to be an accountant, fine, go be an accountant, but you're still going to take history and philosophy and religion, all your 101 classes, where at other universities, you might just take accounting. And so I think GU prepares, again, mind, body, and spirit, the well-rounded whole person. It puts us as graduates in a position where we're asking questions that maybe someone else never even thought to ask. Doesn't mean we're going to know the answer, but just by posing the question, I think it makes us an even more valuable asset to whatever team we're on, because we might be able to look at a problem a little bit differently or take a step back and look from a slightly different perspective. And so again, where Nike has these big problems to solve, again, our supply chain been doing this like every other supply chain in the world right now. I think that opportunity to be able to look at things differently, or with the relationships I have, call a friend who's running their own business and be like, what are you seeing? Again, leveraging relationships. And that's where Nike, I think, is so strong, is it's people. At the end of the day, it's people. And so trying to understand how you get the most out of people, most out of your team. I was just like, man, am I still at GU? It feels like a college campus sometimes. There's tough days, but I feel really fortunate to have GU. Best decision of my life. Obviously, the reason I'm where I'm at and the people that I met, and Nike just continues to challenge me going forward. And with the opportunity to travel to Asia, Spokane got me out of my high school bubble. Traveling the United States through ball got me so many different perspectives that are just unbelievably valuable. And then being able to see Asia and Europe that just the perspective that you gain from that, hard sometimes to see it in the moment, but, looking back on it, it's such a valuable asset to have.
Well, Andrew, I appreciate the time. Look forward to reconnecting again on another podcast at some point, because I think we're just scratching the surface of some of the stories that and experiences that you can provide. Hopefully, we'll get a chance to connect at some point in person at the ZAG game in the future. But thanks for joining, and best of luck in the near future with the Nike opportunities. And go Zags.
Go Zags.